Okay, hello everybody and welcome to our Dinternal book webinar on MyEnglishLab. I hope you can all hear me. Yes, hello Irina from Lviv. My name's Michael and I'm from Newcastle upon Tyne in England. Just so I know that you can all hear me, can you just let me know where you're from? So we have Odessa, Kiev, Ukraine. And hello to you, and hello to Lviv again, hello from London. Okay. Ismail, I saw, Uzhgorod, Lugansk region, Lviv, Kiev, Lutsk, hello Lutsk. Belgorod, I've been to the wonderful castle in your town before. Kamyansk, I've only been through there on the train. Cherkasy region. Sumy, Chernihiv, Biletsevka. Okay, wonderful. So all around Ukraine. Zhytomyr, okay, lots of places. Dnipro, wonderful. Lots and lots of places that I recognize here. So hello to you all, and thank you very much for joining from Poltava to us today. The title of the webinar today, as you may know, is MyEnglishLab, Informing Teaching and Enriching Learning. But I'd like to start the webinar, before we get onto MyEnglishLab, with a more general question. And it's a general question for you all. And it is, we're all teachers. So could you please type in the box the thing that you like best about your job? And I'm guessing it's not writing in such great detail on a chalkboard, as you can see in one of those pictures. But what's the best thing about teaching for you all? Results? No, the students? Interaction? I like the answers. A lot of answers here about students, about communication, about working with students. Perfect. Collaboration. Student smiles, knowledge, achievements. Okay. This is wonderful. So this actually taps into a central part of our job as teachers. This is what I guess is the thing that keeps us in teaching. That for me, like you're saying giving and getting knowledge, achievement. For me, I've been teaching since the last century, since the end of 1999. And for me, it's wonderful to be face-to-face with students, to see them making progress. And I know whether you teach in primary, secondary, PLS, private language schools, or universities, there's this great feeling of seeing your students make progress. So as language teachers, we sometimes see them at elementary level, and we can see them progress through intermediate to upper intermediate. We see them take exams. We see them graduate from school or university. We see them, a lot of things you're saying here, results and achievements. And in many cases, and I've taught in 11 different countries, I still keep in touch with a lot of my students. In many cases, I taught students at school or at university who I'm still in touch with today. And I can see how English has helped them in their studies and in their careers as well. This is the best thing about teaching. I think we can all agree. Communication, results, working with students, collaborating with them, helping our students to be independent and confident learners. So this is the best thing about teaching. But you know, for every high, there is, unfortunately, a low. And so, well, if we have the best things, we know that there are also some problems that we can face. And unfortunately, I guess some of these pictures might be familiar to you. So certainly for me, in my teaching career, the top left picture of having lots and lots of paperwork. You're right, Katerina, yes. And, Oksana, I'm sorry about the bad sound. What I can recommend, if you try disconnecting and reconnecting, this might help. So, terrible books. Yes, this overload of work. You know, there's a joke that a lot of my friends in England used to tell me, which maybe you've heard too. A lot of my non-teacher friends always asked me what the best thing about teaching was. Actually, the two best things about teaching. And you know the two best things about teaching are July and August. So for non-teachers, they imagine that we have lots and lots of free time. That at 3:30, we say goodbye to our students and that's it. They're gone. And we know as practicing teachers that while the students might not be there, their work remains with us. And so we have a lot of marking to do, a lot of planning to do, and somehow a lot of you are talking about programs and curriculums, and we also have this institutional pressure that we have a lot of work to do in a limited amount of time. And if I asked you all today how many hours you have with your students every week, you would give me a lot of different answers. But your overall answer would be the same. 25, 15, 18, 22, 30, 25. Some of you might say lower, 6, 12, 8. But actually, your answer will always be the same. And the answer is not enough. That we know as teachers, and specifically as language teachers working here in Ukraine, that we always need more time with our students if they are to achieve the results that we want them to achieve. That unfortunately, they're not living in London like one of our participants. They don't leave our classroom and speak English to people. So often the only chance that they get to really practice their English, to speak in English, is in our classrooms. And, well, I guess once upon a time a very bright teacher came up with a solution to this problem. How do we get the students to work outside of classroom hours? And you know the solution was this magic word, homework. Unfortunately, homework, as we all know, is not without its own problems. And well, I guess in my teaching career, the biggest problem for me with homework is this, that I'm never sure whether the students really spent much time working, or if, well, they just found this magic solution of checking the answer key at the back of the book, or actually if they found this equally magic solution of just waiting for their friend or partner to do the homework and then copying the answers from them. You know, that's only one problem with homework. Because I guess copying comes down to motivation. And when they're in front of me and we're collaborating and we're working, well, then I can motivate them face to face. But how do you motivate students to do homework? How do you motivate them? Giving sweets, Helen, that's certainly one answer, little treats. But how do we motivate them consistently? Marks, perhaps. You can make it part of their assessment. So you can say that some of your overall mark is going to be for your homework score. Encouraging. You're right, these are all things that we do naturally as teachers. We encourage them, we set them interesting tasks, coursework, but ultimately we know that not all students are motivated by homework. So we need to think of solutions. Homework is not an answer in itself. It also poses challenges for us. Well, you know, one problem I've had in the past is that some students get too enthusiastic. And some students, if I'm on Unit 2 of the book, they're already trying to do Unit 3 or Unit 4 in their workbook. And well, is this because they're very enthusiastic? Is this because they've worked out that if they do the homework before I cover it in class, then in a month's time, when I'm on to Unit 4, they can just tell me, I already did that homework. Perhaps they only spent 10 seconds or 20 seconds on it. Because as language teachers, we understand, of course, that the point of the homework is not just the results. It's not enough to just say, I've done the homework. That we're interested in how they did the homework, how long they took on the homework, how carefully they thought about the homework and processed the work that they were doing. And this is all tied up, of course, to motivation. Especially for teenage students, they might just say, I'm finished, that's it, I'm done. They prioritize the results. And as language teachers, we prioritize the process as well, because every minute that they're working with English is another minute that they're interacting with English and practicing their language skills. Well, you know, this is a problem for us as teachers, I suppose, and this goes back to this pile of homework that we had before, this pile of paper that we saw on the teacher's desk that, well, you know, you might have motivated students. You might set them lots of, encourage them, set them lots of practical tasks to do. You might get the work back, give them feedback, give it back to them to check over again. You might use lots of tricks like correction codes to encourage them again to think about their work and the kind of mistakes they make. But ultimately, this all increases the workload for us as teachers. And as teachers, we're only people. We're not machines. And I've had lots of cases in the past where I have been able to motivate students to do homework. Partly me, partly them realizing the importance of homework and how it's relevant to them. But then they give me the homework back, and they're so motivated by doing this homework that they want immediate feedback. They want immediate correction. They want to see the homework and then go and do something again. And well, I don't just have one class. I might have 8 classes, 9 classes, 10 classes. And it might be just a few controlled practice activities. Or it might be, if I'm teaching exam classes, which I have in the past lots and lots of times, it might be the fact that I'm trying to mark a whole class of written assignments. When I've taught at universities in the past, I've had to mark maybe 2,000 words from every student and had 20 students to mark. And simply, I cannot do this in one day. I can't do it in one day well. And so to do it properly, to correct and to prepare feedback, it takes a lot of time. And it's not just thinking about the group, of course, because we know as teachers that we don't just think about the group as a whole. That we might have a group of 10 students, of 20 students, of 30 students, but we think about each individual student because each student has their own ability, their own motivation, and their own unique needs. And again, this takes time to reflect on the homework, to mark the homework, and to think about the areas of difficulty, the problems that each student has. Now, we started with the best things about teaching, and I worry now that I've gone too much into problems that we have as teachers, problems that we can have with homework. So, I want to inspire us all again. And I was looking for a quote, a sentence that could fill us with motivation and enthusiasm. A sentence that could tell us something profound, something important about the relationship between teachers and students. Because when I asked you the best thing about teaching, you all said students, collaboration, working with people. So I was looking for a quote, for a motivational, inspirational quote about teaching and learning. And the quote I found was actually from a student. But not just any student. This is a student called Adora Svitak. You might have heard of her before. She made a very famous TED talk called What Adults Can Learn from Children. And as you can see, she's addressed the United Nations on education, and according to many newspapers, she's the world's cleverest child. At the age of 8, she was writing short stories. She was reading philosophy in French. What she said was this, as you can see, that the most important thing as teachers is that we connect with our students and can understand them and their culture. And I think this was important in any time period, but it's especially important today when culture is changing very quickly. When the things that we were used to when we were studying can be completely different to how students study today. And if I think about my students today, and if you think about your students today, we can picture them in front of us in the classroom. But where do they go when they leave our classrooms? Well, some of them go and meet, in Ukraine, they go and meet Mr. Bogdan. So some of them are on public transport, on the metro, on marshrutkas. Some of them perhaps go and eat something, fast food restaurants, cafes. Some of them go home. Some of them go home and then they go straight into their bedroom, of course. But as this picture gives a hint, I would say, teenage sports clubs, home, hanging outside the streets with their friends, watching TV, helping parents in the gardens. This is a really good answer, Helen. Yes, this is not what I did when I was a teenager. But I would say, really, no matter where they go, they're always in one place. And Tatiana has described this place already. Wherever they are, I would say they're always online. Because wherever the students are, they are never far from their phones, their tablets, or an internet connection. Exactly, Irina. Most of them are screenagers. And to be honest, most of us spend a lot of time looking at screens nowadays too. So this is the natural place for them. If they're in their bedroom, you can be sure that they have their phone with them. If they're on a bus and they have Wi-Fi, you can be sure that they're looking at their phone. You're right here. They go home and then straight on the internet. Now, traditionally, we might look at this as a problem. But I would say if we take Adora's quote and we really think about this, we really think about connecting with our students and understanding their culture, then this is where we need to begin. This is where we need to connect with them. And this is where MyEnglishLab comes in. So, what is MyEnglishLab? Some of you might be asking. And well, one answer for what MyEnglishLab is this. It's a lot of words on a screen. Okay, it's interactive. Well, of course it's interactive. It's online. It's flexible. It enriches learning. It informs teaching. And it enhances. Well, at the moment, these are just words. Why is it flexible? Well, as I'll show you in a moment, one reason that I can honestly say that MyEnglishLab is flexible is this was designed by teachers for teachers. MyEnglishLab started about 8 years ago in higher education in the USA with a teacher just like me and just like many of you. A teacher who wanted to make the most of the time that they had with their students. A teacher who had a lot of homework to mark and was looking for a way to mark it more effectively. And so he asked a friend, this is my problem, is there anything you can do? And the solution was MyEnglishLab. But MyEnglishLab is controlled by you, the teacher. You control the technology. You decide how you work with the technology. The technology does not control you. Why does it enrich? Well, I'll show you in a moment. We've done a lot of studies with real students and real teachers all around the world using MyEnglishLab. And our results, our research evidence shows that it really improves motivation and student engagement. As Tatiana says, it's interesting for students when you teach them. As Lena said, she's been using MyEnglishLab and she has many reasons why she really likes it. One reason might be, and I've used MyEnglishLab here in Ukraine with students, is that it gives me a lot of information about my teaching. It doesn't just tell me what the students did, it tells me how they did it, how many times they tried to do their homework, how long they took to do their homework, and when they did their homework. And well, why does it enhance your Pearson course? Well, you know, a lot of teachers say to me when I talk to them about MyEnglishLab, I understand, I get it. In the past, we had a student book and a paper workbook. And now you're going to give us a student book and this online tool. And it's the same, right? It's just like the paper workbook. And the answer is yes and no. A very English answer here. So, why yes? Because everything that you can find in the paper workbook is also on MyEnglishLab. But why no? Because, well, I studied English literature. I love paper. I love reading books. But as we all know, there are just lots of things that you cannot do with paper that you can do online. So having all of these resources online gives you a lot more options, a lot more, back to this word, flexibility, and a lot more information about the homework that your students are doing. And Helen, yes, the question on prices. Yes, the prices are the same as they would be for the workbook. Now, what are we talking about? What do we talk about when we talk about MyEnglishLab? I told you that it started about 8 years ago in the USA. As you can see here now, it's now used in over 190 countries, including Ukraine, at primary school level, at secondary school level, at university level, and with adult learners. And as you can see here, it's used by customers, by real students in more than 180 languages. And I mentioned before that everything we do is based on research. So as you can see here, we have the research that MyEnglishLab was based on originally, but we also have these ongoing, continuous case studies and efficacy reports. So case studies, we go and we speak to real teachers all around the world, and as it shows you here, we find out how they're using it in secondary schools, in primary schools, in universities. And we also do research projects where we go and we work with teachers who are using MyEnglishLab. We research how they're using it, and then we publish all of the results online. So all of the results of these case studies and efficacy reports, after this webinar, you can go, you can Google them, and they're all free and open to read. Here are some examples. So as you can see here, a few years ago, Pearson did a huge study with secondary school teachers in Poland, and we took some students who were using MyEnglishLab and plus compared them to students who weren't using MyEnglishLab. And as you can see, their exam results, and we talked at the start about achievements and results, were measurably better if they used MyEnglishLab. 90% of teachers said that checking homework is less time consuming for them, and 80% said they had more time to, and this magic word that we said at the start, the best thing about teaching, to communicate with their students in class. And as you can see, we're not just talking about Poland here, because here is just one example from a teacher from a private language school in Argentina. And she talked about this benefit of motivation because students get their results instantly. The question about all students' books, not every single student book comes with MyEnglishLab, but a lot of student books come with MyEnglishLab, and almost all of our kind of main titles come with this. In fact, when we talk about MyEnglishLab, I would think of it more like a house. So, inside this online platform, we currently have more than 250 different products. So some of you might know about Wider World. That comes with MyEnglishLab. Some of you might know about Focus. Some adult books as well, Speak Out, New Language Leader, Market Leader. But MyEnglishLab isn't just to go with course books. We also have the possibility to do placement testing for your students online in just over half an hour, and all delivered through MyEnglishLab. There are progress tests, and also we have supplementary materials. A lot of you might have heard of My Grammar Lab. So My Grammar Lab, you have the book and also the online extra grammar practice. Lena, yes, Speak Out 2nd edition comes with MyEnglishLab as well. And well, Arena, I would say MyEnglishLab is time-consuming for students, but in the best possible way. Because studies that we've done in Ukraine, for example, with real students, shows that on average, from the beginning of the study till the end, they were spending 5 times longer on their homework. And well, this is time consuming in the best possible way, because as we said before, we want our students to be motivated and engaged to do more homework. So for me, this is a wonderful selling point, and when I've used it with real students as well, because it's online, because it's instantly available and instantly checked, it really does motivate them to do more homework. It's much more practical for them. You know, if our students are on Marshrutkas or the metro, they're really not going to sit with a paper workbook on their knee. But they will, for sure, have their phone or their tablet right next to them. They never put these away in their bags. They never leave them at home. Now, one of you mentioned just recently, Lina, about Speak Out 2nd edition. So let me show you how this looks. Now here you can see this is a normal Speak Out 2nd edition book, but it comes with MyEnglishLab. This means that when your students open the book, on the inside cover, there will be a code that they scratch, and this will get them access to MyEnglishLab. When they go into MyEnglishLab, it looks like this. So you have the units down the left-hand side. Remember I said earlier that as a teacher, sometimes I don't want my students to be able to race ahead of me in the book. So if you look on the left-hand side where we have Unit 1, Unit 2, you will also see an eye icon. And as a teacher, you can simply click on this eye icon, and this content will be hidden from your students. What you can see now is the last section of the book, which are tests. So if you like tests, then you have unit tests, you have achievement tests, you have mid-course tests, you have end-of-course tests. If you want, you could test your students to death with this. But remember what I said before, it's very flexible. So you have all of the tests here, but you decide when and how you allocate these tests. You give these tests to your students. You as a teacher might only be using Speak Out or Focus for 1 year, but their codes to access these materials are valid for 21 months. So it means even if you're teaching Speak Out Intermediate, and next year your students are going to be using Speak Out Upper Intermediate, well, they can still go back and review the tests that you didn't assign them. But the good news for you is, while they're doing the tests later, it doesn't mean that they're coming to you and asking you to mark the tests, because the tests are almost always marked immediately by the system. So it means, Helena, if your students like testing, MyEnglishLab is perfect for them. All of the tests they need in one place. Now, if we look at the unit, at one unit of MyEnglishLab, so this is Speak Out 2nd Edition Intermediate, you can see here, this is Unit 9, and it's about history. And here are how the activities would look to a teacher or a student who was using this platform. If we go into some of these activities, well, you can see here what I really like is this integrated listening. So here they don't need to find a CD, they don't need to find a place to play the CD, everything's in one place. Here we have this, these hypothetical conditionals, the third conditional, and we know that the structure is difficult for students, but also the pronunciation. So here they can listen, and then they need to add the missing contractions or the words. If they're not completely sure about what is the third conditional, I've forgotten the structure. Well, you see the light bulb in the top right corner. If you want the students to have access to more information, when you set them this homework, you can also decide how many attempts they will have at the homework, whether it will be timed, so there's a 1 or 2 minute time limit, or whether it's going to be free. And you can also decide whether you want to give them extra tips and feedback. So here, if you want to give them extra information about the grammar point, they can see it, and again, all in one place on the same screen. They click here, they review, they click the light bulb again, and they do the activity. They don't need to go searching for their books. Here again, before I talked about things that you can't do with paper, and we know that our students need lots of pronunciation practice. So here, this is a great function on MyEnglishLab. We're now taking them into their own pronunciation practice. What they can do is on the left-hand side, they click listen, they hear a native speaker pronouncing the sentence, then they click record, and then they can listen and they can play back. Now, as a teacher, you decide when you give them this homework, do you want them to have 1 try at this, 2 tries at this, 3 tries at this? For me as a teacher using MyEnglishLab, I like to give them 3 attempts, 1, 2, 3. And why? Well, because they have it on their phone. They try it the first time. They're not completely satisfied. But because they have their phone in their hands, they're ready to try again. It's no problem for them to try again. So they try again the second time. They try again the third time. Now, obviously, there is no miracle solution. No student is going to stand for 24 hours re-recording their voices. But these 3 attempts on the practice activities, for me, give them the opportunity to spend more time practicing. So here they can record, they can play back, and well, again, what does it mean for you as the teacher? It means for you as the teacher, when you want to listen to them speaking, you sit down, you access the system in your most comfortable seat at a time you choose, and you can listen to your students' pronunciation 1 by 1. Now, of course, as somebody said here, not all of them have access to this at home. So you might use this at school, in an IT room, for example. But I would say that almost every Ukrainian student that I've met has Wi-Fi access somewhere. Be it in a cafe, a restaurant, in their home, on their phone. If it's not theirs, it's their parents have a laptop. But I would say that Ukraine, certainly, I said I've lived in 11 countries, the Wi-Fi network in Ukraine is much better than the Wi-Fi network in Japan, for example, believe it or not. So I think here the opportunity is there. Remember what I said about flexibility. If you think that your students wouldn't be able to do this at home, then you don't set this for all of your students. You can decide to give this to the whole class or just to students who need this practice. But the tool, the option is there for you as a teacher. Now, there's also inbuilt listening work again. Now, remember, you don't need CDs for this. Everything is in one place. So here they listen and they match to the pictures. And again, as a teacher, you can then decide whether you want them to just listen or whether you want them to be able to see the tape script too. And yes, Helen, there are writing options too. I'm going to get onto this in a moment. So not just listening, all of the skills are here. There's grammar, there's vocabulary, and functional work too. And in answer to the question here, yes, what would happen is the students would buy the book. So for example, the students would buy Focus, and it would come with an access code for this book. So instead of getting Focus plus workbook, you get Focus plus MyEnglishLab. The same with Speak Out Second Edition, and the same with Market Leader, for example. Now, you know one thing with a lot of our Pearson resources is they come with the BBC videos. So all of these videos and with exercises are also in one place on MyEnglishLab. When your students are watching the videos, there's also, as you can see here, the option for them to turn subtitles on or off. So it means that they could watch the videos first, do the activities, then you could set them this activity again, perhaps as homework, but this time with a timer, or this time with the subtitles on. You have a lot of flexibility here. It's all up to you. You know, for me as a teacher, in fact, this flexibility is great because sometimes I give them a controlled practice activity, a grammar activity. I don't put the timer on. But then later, I give them the homework again as a review, and I do it more like a game, as a challenge. This time, they have to do it only in a minute. They have a minute to do this. So it means with this flexibility of the online platform, you can actually give the same homework more than once, but in a slightly different way. You have lots of possibilities here. If we look at an example of an activity, well, here's one that I tried to do earlier. Unfortunately, I was in a little bit of a hurry. And well, I was doing this basic review of verb tenses. You can see here I filled in a lot of my answers. And what I got was, well, unfortunately only 63%. I was too quick here. But what's good for me is I got immediate answers straight away. Not just my score, because it's not just about testing, but it's also about teaching. So what I also got here is I got feedback, not just my final results, which means less work for you as teachers, and motivation for students because they get immediate answers, but I also got a little bit of teaching. As you can see here, because my teacher had set up this homework to give me feedback on my answers, well, I made this mistake with finded, and it reminds me, it pushes me towards the correct answer, that find has irregular past forms. On the other hand, when I get an answer correct, it also gives me this positive reinforcement. It tells me not just that my answer is right, but it tells me why my answer was right. Now, as a teacher, do you want them to get this feedback? If you do, then it's very easy to set it up to give them feedback. If you don't, for example, in a test, then you just switch the feedback off. Everything is controlled by you as the teacher. What we get as teachers as well is this. When our students do these homework activities, we get this grade book. And the grade book shows us at a glance, as you can see here, easy color coding, what they've done. So we can see red, these students need more help. Green, these students are doing very well. Now, if you don't like the color red or the color green, you can change the color. If your school says that an A is 90% and another school says an A is 85%, you can change the grade settings as well. Everything is controlled by you. Here, it shows us the score for the last attempt they made. But if I've set up the activity to give them 3 attempts, I can see the score for the first attempt and for the final attempt. So I can also see the progress that the students made. Maybe they got 56% the first time and 82% the second time. It gives me a lot of information as a teacher here. It also gives me this common error report. And the common error report looks like this. So I don't just see their final score. I can see their first score and their last score. But then I can go as a teacher into more detail. So what I see here is question by question. What the mistake was, who made the mistake, and how many students in total made the mistake. So what does this mean for you as a teacher? Well, it means at the moment when I go into my classroom, I don't know if they've done the homework or not until I ask the question, have you done the homework? And you know, of course, what happens. Maybe 20% have done the homework and had no problems. 20% suddenly look at the floor. What's going on? Don't look at me. 20% say, what homework? 20% say, I did it, but I've left my book at home. Now, as a teacher with MyEnglishLab, you can control the time that they do the homework because you can set them deadlines. If your next class is at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, you can set the deadline to be 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon or 11 a.m. on Friday morning. And that gives you time as the teacher to look at this gradebook to see which students have made mistakes, and then it means you don't start your class from a position of uncertainty. Have they done the homework? How well did they do? Instead, you start your class from the gap in your students' knowledge. And of course, we know here we're using an intermediate level adult book, a review of verb tenses. And if I asked you all now just to take one verb tense, present perfect, have your students studied the present perfect before? You will all probably say yes. But if I asked you, can they use it perfectly? Then you would say, well, I'm not sure. Well, they should be able to, but I don't know. Well, and this is the help that MyEnglishLab can give you. If you have an activity with, say, the present perfect or reported speech, you know they've studied it before, but you don't know how well they remember it. You can give this homework before your lesson. You can then check how many mistakes they've made and who's made the mistakes before you go into the classroom. And this means when you go into the classroom, you're ready to start at the very place where their knowledge ends, which of course gives you more time for communication, gives you more time for collaboration, and gives you more time for production work, which is what they need. Now, I showed you the front page of the gradebook, but if you want more information, I talked about flexibility and information. Everything is here. Do you want to know how much time your students spent doing their homework? Do you want to know when they did their homework? Well, all of the information is here for you. And that means if you're teaching in secondary schools, for example, all of this information can then be given to parents. If parents ask you why their children's scores aren't as high as they expected them to be, well, one reason might be that they're just not spending enough time doing their homework. Now, it's not your opinion, it here is a fact through the system. One of you asked before about writing. Here's an example of a writing activity. Some of the writing activities are sentence level or paragraph level. They involve putting words into gaps, like controlled practice activities. These are marked by the system automatically. But we also have longer writing activities. So here, it's an essay writing activity with 150 word maximum limit. If you wanted to set this to your students as a teacher, well, you can see here, as I mentioned before, you decide how many attempts they're going to have. You decide whether you're going to show them hints and tips to help them. You can show them a model answer to help them. And you decide what the maximum score available will be. Now, because this is a full essay, The system won't mark all of this for you, but it will help you in a lot of ways. So here, in one way it will help you is like this. When you come to mark the writing, it won't be perhaps messy handwriting that is very difficult to read from your students. It won't be a big pile of paper on your desk that you worry about losing. Everything will be sent immediately and electronically through the platform. So you will see their writing, and as you can see here, MyEnglishLab gives you a lot of different criteria that you can choose from, flexibility. It gives you the flexibility here to choose what you are marking on. And if I want to mark on vocabulary, I click on vocabulary, I highlight the section I want to mark, a box opens up, and I write a comment. I don't need to find the student or wait for the next class to give my feedback. My feedback is there immediately. So it's much easier for you to collect and to mark and to give back the written homework or the written tests in this way. As I said before, maybe a general model for using MyEnglishLab looks like this. You do the lesson, you give them homework, they do it online, you check it before the next class, and then you are able to plan your next class effectively before you start it to target their problem areas. However, as we said before, if you're giving homework on something that you think they studied before or that they should know something about, you can flip this process. So you could give them the online practice and then you could deliver the lesson after this. So again, you have lots and lots of flexibility here. You use this in the way that best suits you, your students, and your teaching situation. This is why it was designed. I mentioned before about lots of information being available online. A lot of the case studies we have mention how this can be done. So how you can change the homework to give it before the class, and how MyEnglishLab helps you to do this. Oksana asks, would it work for one-to-one classes? Yes, in the same way. You would then just look at your student's account. You could give them the homework. If you have a student one-to-one, you could say, let's go online. This is the homework I'm going to give you, and the deadline is a day before the next one-on-one class. It would work in exactly the same way. To show you another example, here, well, and somebody says it's a good question if you've only got a chalk and a wooden board at school. Well, you know, I used to teach in Britain. In Britain, the government 20 years ago paid for interactive whiteboards for every classroom. And then a few years later, I visited India. And I realized that India was actually ahead of Britain in many ways. Because in Britain, we were still having this argument about infrastructure inside the classroom. In India, they weren't talking about fitting things inside the classroom. They were talking about the infrastructure that their students had. That their students have, in India, Wi-Fi connections, great IT facilities in big cities, smartphones, tablets, and they said the infrastructure is with the students. That with MyEnglishLab, we're not using it usually in the classroom. Some teachers use it in the classroom, but because it's set as homework out of the classroom, well, if you only have a wooden board and chalk, well, that doesn't matter. What matters is what your students have. And I know not every student will have Wi-Fi connection, but I think in Ukraine, as I travel around the country, a lot of students either have smartphones or access to the internet at home or nearby. Maybe not at school, but the infrastructure is there, and it doesn't need to be used in the classroom. Just to show you another example so you can see how it matches up, here with Market Leader. Here are the 2 pages from Market Leader. You can see here we have, this is something that university students or business students might be using. There's some vocabulary here. We have video activities with a real life person from a British shopping TV channel. We have modal verbs of obligation, must, have to. And then when we go online into MyEnglishLab, you can see the same layout as with Speak Out. So familiar, easy to navigate. We go into Unit 3. And well, what we can see here, again, here's some language review on modals of obligation, but not just the controlled practice or the typing activities. We also here have this integrated pronunciation work on connected speech, because we know it's not I have to go, but I have to go. So here the students listen to native speakers all in one place and then can practice their pronunciation work. I talked about some of the writing is marked automatically. Here's a good example. Here's a paragraph with extra words. The students correct it and it's marked automatically, not by you, but by the system. And here's an example of a unit test. So again, this is a unit test on the vocabulary that they practiced in the book. What's great with Market Leader as well is we also have these premier lessons that come as part of the Financial Times. And if you have a MyEnglishLab subscription for Market Leader, every month you get a new premier lesson. It's based on a real contemporary Financial Times article. And an example of this from a few years ago, some of them are very detailed in business terms. Some of them are more general, things that would be interesting even for students who aren't really so interested in business yet. So here it's about football teams and shirt sponsorship, Liverpool FC. You can see everything is produced for the teacher here, not just the text, but reading comprehension, vocabulary, a task for communication, and what's more, you even have the answer keys. So here, this is an extra addition because what I wanted to say is MyEnglishLab is not a dead platform. It's something that Pearson are constantly working on and are constantly improving. And one thing for me that's very important and really helps me with my students, and we mentioned this before about communication, but we also know as teachers that what's important nowadays is that students are able to work autonomously. And so we also know that learner autonomy does not mean students working without the teacher. As the quote here says, learner autonomy is when students are able to assess their own learning, but with the teacher's support, the teacher's initiation, and the teacher's direction. And as a user of MyEnglishLab myself, I know, and as we've hopefully shown in this webinar, MyEnglishLab gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of information, and it allows you as the teacher to control the process from the background, but the students with the marking that they get automatically, with the extra feedback and tips, it gives them a lot of opportunities to work by themselves outside of the class, which really involves them in the learning process. If you're interested in finding out more information about MyEnglishLab, this website is great. It has lots and lots of information for teachers and students. Any questions that you have relating to how it actually works, not the price, but how it actually works, will be answered here. And we also have lots of extra webinars and extra training videos. So as you can see here, there are training videos on getting started, on the content, on helping students. These are training videos that have already been recorded, but we also have live training sessions. So we're adding new webinars, and just like you did today, you can sign up, and if you're interested in finding out more information, you can join these webinars as well. So there's a lot of information. This was just a general overview and an introduction to MyEnglishLab. So I hope you found it useful. I can see in the comments box that you had a lot of questions about what it is exactly, whether it matches up with specific books. Today I only showed you a couple of books, but as I said before, there are more than 250 products that go with MyEnglishLab. The great news for you as a teacher is, even if you used all 250, you only need to remember one password and one username, because everything is in one place. So I'd like to say thank you very much. I hope you found it useful. And if you do need any more information, we're always here to help. So you know our websites. You know that we travel around Ukraine a lot. So it was a pleasure speaking to you all today. And I really, really, really hope to see you all again soon in the wonderful cities all around Ukraine where you're from. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm glad to see that it was useful and interesting. It was wonderful talking to you all. So, спасибо, дякую, and goodbye.